UFC Fight Night Rozenstruik versus Gaziev is this weekend. I'm going to give you a full card prediction and breakdown of all 11 fights on this card, starting with Klein versus AJ Cunningham. I'm going to go with Klein. I believe this fight got added a little bit late. I can't remember if Joel Alvarez was supposed to be on here because I remember seeing some kind of fight news on Big Marcel about Joel Alvarez. I don't remember if it was this fight or not, but I think this one was added pretty recently, or at least Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios was added. That's what the 11th fight was, because I remember looking at this card and there was only 10 fights. So, but anyways, getting into this fight, I am going to go with Klein here. AJ Cunningham is just way too hittable. He was on the Contender Series against Steven Nguyen. I believe Steven Nguyen actually didn't fight for 2 years between the two Contender Series fights that he did have, and he was able to beat AJ Cunningham. So I know AJ Cunningham beat an 8-10 opponent after his last Contender Series fight and won by ground and pound. I still don't think he's going to be that great in this fight. Klein is at least a decent fighter in the UFC. Beat Ignacio Bahamondes in his last fight by decision. Went to a majority draw against Jai Herbert, who's a decent fighter. Mason Jones beat him a year and 7 months. Mason Jones, I think, just came off a win at Cage Wars. I'm not going to get all into that, but I think Klein has the power in his hands to actually hurt AJ Cunningham pretty badly. I don't mind a finish here because AJ Cunningham is just way too hittable. I will say, though, AJ Cunningham's a guy he does have a decent chin. However, he's really scrappy, and the fact that Klein lost to Nate Landwehr, not saying Nate Landwehr is bad or anything, but a scrappy guy like Nate Landwehr at certain points, I mean, it is kind of worrying a little bit, but I do think Klein can get it done against AJ Cunningham. I don't think he's that good, so I'm going Klein here, probably by TKO in the second or third round is what I'll say. I think AJ Cunningham's just way too hittable in this fight. Up the card, we have Christian Leroy Duncan versus Claudio Ribeiro. I'm going with Christian Leroy Duncan. I mean, some of these fights are a little bit straightforward. This is a very big prospect card. I will kind of just say that. There's a lot of prospects on this card. That's the only reason why I'm willing to watch this entire card, is because the prospects on here are actually kind of interesting to see. So I kind of just want to watch those just for that. But Claudio Ribeiro lost to Roman Kopylov, lost to Abdul Razak Al Hassan, and they all kind of just have power. They all have a very, I don't want to say unorthodox, but they have a very dynamic game on the feet. They have a lot of weapons on the feet, and they're able to hurt Claudio Ribeiro very badly. Abdul Razak Al Hassan was able to KO Ribeiro, and then same thing with Kopylov. I think Christian Leroy Duncan can kind of do the same thing here. I know Christian Leroy Duncan has more of a technical style and kind of will just stay on the outside. He does throw a lot of crazy stuff. He did get a win over Dennis Tululin by KO. I think he can get a KO over Claudio Ribeiro. I don't mind this one going to decision, but I think a late round KO probably is the way that I'm looking at this one. I think a late round TKO. I can just see Christian Leroy Duncan just catching him with a head kick. He's a guy that's going to bounce around a lot. He's a really good athlete. Again, a lot of crazy stuff. You kind of saw that in his Armen Petrosian fight. He was on, or at least he beat Dusko Todorovic. If you have seen his fights, you'll understand what I'm saying. He did it a little bit too much against Armen Petrosian, where he's just doing too much of the fancy stuff, and it was just not working for him. But I think he'll figure it out. He's a young guy, still 28 years of age. I think he beats Claudio Ribeiro with relative ease here. I don't see Christian Leroy Duncan losing this fight, so I'm going Christian Leroy Duncan by TKO in the second or third round. Up the card, we have Loik Radzhabov versus Abdul Karim Al-Swadi. I couldn't get his name right on the Contender Series either, but this is a guy who beat George Hardwick on the Contender Series, so definitely some eyes on Al-Swadi is how I'll say his name. I'm probably butchering it, but I think he can get it done against Loik Radzhabov. He's a guy that's going to pressure you. He's a smaller guy. He's 5'8" compared to the 5'11" that Radzhabov is. And I don't want to say it's comparable, but Selwady was able to pressure on Hardwick because he's a lot more of a smaller guy, and the pressure and the power was definitely giving Hardwick some problems in that fight. Same thing with Rebecki against Radzhabov, who was able to just pressure him. I think Selwady can kind of do the same thing against Radzhabov in this fight. And I'm going to go with Selwady by a TKO here. Maybe more of a decision for this fight. I'm not going to say TKO because Rebecki was able to get the KO. He has tons of power. Maybe he can catch Radzhabov in this fight. He actually took out the legs of Radzhabov in that fight. So I don't know if Selwady's going to be able to take out the legs of Radzhabov. That game isn't necessarily his. Like Rebecki is just very technical on the feet, and he's going to drive forward on you, but he's a guy that's a finisher more or less. I think Al-Swadi, probably a decision is probably the way to go here. I think the pressure, the aggressiveness is going to be taken into account on the judges' scorecards, and I think he's just going to land the better shots. Loik Radzhabov, I mean, he came in and debuted against Esteban Ribeiro, won that one. I think it was on short notice by decision. Ribeiro definitely had some decent stuff against him, which Radzhabov, I mean, Radzhabov's a decent fighter. I just don't think he's that high of a level. So I'm going to go Selwady in this fight. I think do the same kind of game plan over Becky. I don't think he takes out the legs as much, but I do think the pressure is just going to get to Radzhabov a little bit more in this fight, and he'll win by decision. Up the card, we have Javid Basharat versus Aiemann Zahabi. I'm going Javid Basharat in this fight. Basharat, the Basharat brothers are very good. I mean, there's not too much to say about that. It's just one of those things. Javid Basharat is very technical on the feet, very good on the ground as well. I think a guy in Aiemann Zahabi who beat Eryk by KO, beat Ricky Turcios by decision, beat Draco Rodriguez by KO. This is all in the last 3 years. He's 36 years of age now. Javid Basharat, I think, it might just run through him a little bit. He's not a guy that's going to finish anybody. I kind of had that feeling about both of the Basharat brothers, but I think Farid Basharat actually just finished someone. So maybe they do have two different kind of styles. They're both very technical. However, Javid, I thought actually had like more power. But weirdly enough, I think Farid's probably got more of a finishing game because he is a lot faster on the feet, and it does seem like he's able to get a little bit more finishes. So I think Javid Basharat's just going to mix in his takedowns and do an all-around game here. That's what he does. He's very technical on the feet. Can mix in some takedowns as well, and I think that's really going to mess with Zahabi in this fight. So 36 years of age for Zahabi's not going to help him here either. 1 inch of reach advantage for Javid Basharat as well. 28 years of age, just going to continue to get better. I think he beats Aiemann Zahabi by decision in this fight. Up the card, we have Eryk Anders versus Jamie Pickett. I'm going Eryk Anders because Jamie Pickett is not good. He's on a 5-fight losing streak, 13-10. Only at middleweight, by the way. You'll see this kind of thing, I guess. Lost to Josh Fremd by decision. Lost to Bo Nickel by submission. That one was a little bit a weird one because Bo Nickel kind of hit him in the groin and then took him down. But lost to Dennis Tululin by KO, who hasn't looked that great. Lost to Kyle Dawkins by submission, who's not even in the UFC. Has looked good outside of the UFC, but is not good. Or at least UFC level, high UFC level. Jamie Pickett's not that great of a fighter. Even though Eryk Anders is, 37 years of age or almost 37. Jamie Pickett's like 35. I think Eryk Anders can, even if he holds him in the clinch the entire fight, I think he can get this one done. Maybe 29-28 decision or 30-27. I don't really know. I don't think Jamie Pickett's got a decent chin. I don't think he gets KO'd. Maybe I'm completely wrong here, but Eryk Anders, who made it at least decently iffy against Marc-Andre Barriol early on, beat Kyle Dawkins, who Jamie Pickett lost to. I mean, just MMA math is adding up here. Lost to Julian Park by split decision. Andre Muniz by armbar. You know what I mean? He's beating some of these top guys. I won't say top guys. He's beating some of the guys that Jamie Pickett is losing to is what I'll say here. And even though he's 37, I still think he can get this one done. 5-inch reach disadvantage. Jamie Pickett just still hasn't figured out how to use his reach that well either. So I'm going Eryk Anders, whether it's like him holding him against the fence the entire fight or just outstriking Jamie Pickett. I don't think he KOs him. I will say I do think it'll probably be a relatively dominant decision though for Eryk Anders in this fight. Main card, we have Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. I don't know if this fight is actually going to be finalized or not because I did hear that. I don't know if it was Raul Rosas Jr. or Ricky Turcios. They said they didn't agree to a contract or whatever. So whatever it is at this point, who knows? I am going to go Raul Rosas Jr. I know he was just sick. I think it'll probably just be a 29-28 decision. I think it's just going to be a closer decision. Ricky Turcios, I don't even know how committed he is to, I won't say the UFC, but to the game of MMA. I know he trains quite a bit, but it just seems like there's retirement rumors after every fight he had. I mean, I explained it last week on that fight card, but he lost. He last fought a year and 3 months ago. Year and 7 months before then, where he kind of just tried to steal the fight against Zahabi. Like he was just throwing a bunch of punches of what it was. I think he landed only 25 or something like that. So he hasn't looked the best since that tough finale fight. There's not too much to say here. I think Raul Rosas Jr. is probably going to win a little bit in the grappling. I know Ricky Turcios has decent grappling, but I think Raul Rosas Jr., especially for 19, he's going to continue to get better. I think he's going to continue to get better on the feet. I think he just mixes it well on Ricky Turcios. And again, I know he's sick and probably another weight cut's probably not going to help for both of these guys in the following week, but I do think Raul Rosas Jr. Probably 28-27 decision. I don't think he submits Ricky Turcios in this fight, but we'll kind of just see how that one goes. I know Brady, he stands. He's not a crazy grappler, but he's a good wrestler. Couldn't really get that submission on Ricky Turcios. So no one has been able to really finish Ricky Turcios in the UFC. So I'm going to go Raul Rosas Jr. by decision. I think he just mixes it in his game well. Puts on the pressure. I know Ricky Turcios kind of has that pressure forward style where he just throws quite a bit, or at least depending on the Ricky Turcios we do get. If it's the Ricky Turcios that we saw on Tough and his last fight a little bit as well, where he pressures forward and brings the fight, maybe it's going to be a little bit more different. I do think Raul Rosas Jr. can actually mix it in a little bit better on Ricky Turcios in this fight. So 28-27 decision just because he was sick and another weight cut. So up the card we have Umar Nurmagomedov versus Bekzat Almakhan. Very interesting fight. I'm sure a lot of the Umar or Nurmagomedov fans probably say that Umar couldn't find an opponent because they're all ducking him. I don't know if that's true or not, but honestly, I looked into this guy's fight to Bekzat, and on it, just looking at the records, I don't know if everyone's canned fed because you never really know, but 14-1, 12-4, 15-5. I try to go through these a little bit more. Like, these guys are fighting decent comp there. Matea's Gloria is fighting some decent comp as well. 23-18 is a little bit rough, but I mean, even some of these other records. So he's fighting decent opponents. I watched his fight as well. He actually looks pretty technical. So I'm not going to say it's going to be like a super competitive fight, but I don't mind Bekzat winning the first round here, weirdly enough. I think Umar Nurmagomedov I can never say that name correctly, Klein, at least too much, but a year and a month off, I don't know if he's going to look rusty in this fight or not. Maybe the first round, I can see Bekzat kind of just defending some of the takedowns. He's also pretty technical on the feet as well. I think he wins the first round against Umar Nurmagomedov. Oh my God. But I do think Umar definitely takes over. Umar is very good. I'm not saying he's not, but he's a very good fighter. I think he's going to win this one for sure. Bekzat is 26 years of age, so he's still going to... I mean, just depending on how he looks in this fight, I'm not going to say it's going to be like a Diego Lopez-esque thing where he's going to have a chance to finish Umar in this fight, and Umar just toughs it out. I just think that Bekzat looks good early on, but I think Umar definitely takes over as this fight goes on. That's a little hot take prediction here. Plus 650 underdog is a massive underdog. Minus 1,000 favor is kind of crazy, but it kind of makes sense a little bit as well. So we'll see what Bekzat looks like in this fight. I do think he's going to be able to bring it to Umar early on in the fight, but I think, is this one on short notice? I think this fight was actually made quite a bit. Yeah, it's not on short notice, so a weird fight when it was announced, but we'll see how both of these guys look. I think Umar wins this one by decision. People are saying by finish. I don't think he finishes Bekzat in this fight. I'm going to be honest. I really don't think he finishes him. I'm going to say 29-28 decision for Umar. I don't know if that's going to be a little bit of a hot take. I can see Bekzat kind of taking the first round, though. I don't think it's going to be like a massive amount of damage on Umar. I just think he's going to be able to defend the takedowns and probably just land more strikes on the feet. That's really what's going to be. It's not going to be him hurting Umar or him catching him in a submission or anything like that. I think he's just going to do a little bit more on the feet. I do think he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns, but that's just in the first round. I think as the fight goes on, Umar will probably mix it in a little bit better and probably land the better shots. So I'm going Umar Nurmagomedov, 29-28 decision or 30-27. I mean, it's more of what Bekzat looks like in this fight. 17-1. We'll see what he looks like. Up the card, we have Matt Schnell versus Steve Erceg. I'm going Steve Erceg. Matt Schnell, when was the last time Matt Schnell fought? A year and 2 months ago against Mateus Nicolau, where he got KO'd. Beat Sue Muderji in, I think, London, in that crazy fight that was absolutely insane. But Matt Schnell, the thing with Matt Schnell is he doesn't really have a chin. A lot of people are not saying Erceg by KO. I think Erceg wins this one by TKO. He's a good all-around game. He's very technical, and he does have some really good pop in his shots. What I will say is he's a little bit of a slow starter. So I do think end of the first round or second half of the first round and the second round, I think, is probably the window where I think he's going to be able to TKO Matt Schnell. Because, again, he's very technical. However, Matt Schnell is just... the chin is just not there. Alessandro Costa is a durable fighter that's going to be able to make it competitive with a lot of fighters at flyweight. David Dvorak, he beat him on a debut. I think like number 14 David Dvorak at the time. So Steve Erceg has looked pretty impressive. I think eventually he's going to have to evolve a little bit more with his defense because he is kind of hittable a little bit. Like, he does roll with the shots. However, he is getting hit a little bit in his fight. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. At least he's rolling with it, so he's not getting absolutely clipped. But I do think his defense will probably have to evolve a little bit more if he wants to be at the super top part of flyweight. So I do think he does catch Matt Schnell, though. I think it does start out a little bit slower. He has really good takedown defense as well. So I think he's going to be able to TKO Matt Schnell in this fight. Second half of the first round or the second round, I think is probably the window for that. I don't think this one goes to a decision. A lot of people are seeing that for this fight. I think he wins by TKO. I just don't believe in Matt Schnell's chin. He's taken a lot of damage as well. I know he's taken a year off, but Mateus Nicolau by KO. Sumo Derji got hurt like 4 times in that fight before ended up like finishing. Sumo Derji got hurt against Brandon Royval as well. So I'm going Steve Erceg by TKO in the second round. Up the card, we have Alex Perez versus Muhammad Mokaev. I'm going with Muhammad Mokaev. Again, this is just a prospect card. I'm just going to be honest. Like, I just want to see what these prospects look like. The competition isn't stiff at all. We'll see if Alex Perez actually makes it to this fight. I'm going to be honest. You know, it's pretty crazy with Alex Perez when you see all of this. I mean, I was trying to look at some of his fights, and his last fight was against Alejandro Pantoja, where he just got destroyed. I mean, Pantoja literally just went out there and just climbed on his back and submitted him pretty early in that fight, and that was what, in 2022. Then before then it was in 2020 where he got his last fight. But look at all these canceled bouts. I think like maybe 1 or 2 maybe might have not been him. He missed weight there. Askarov withdrew. See, and there's that one. Perez withdrew. Kai Car France injury there. So not all of them are him, but a majority are. So I am going to go with Muhammad Mokaev. I don't want to say he's, weirdly enough, okay, I predicted him to beat Tim Elliott, but I will say he is developing quite a bit now. So he's 23 years of age. If you would have asked me about a year and a half ago, I would have said he's definitely a little bit overrated, but I do think he's developing at a decent pace at this point, even with his moments that it looked pretty rough against him with Charles Johnson. I mean, he couldn't really, it wasn't like domination there. He won by decision. But the Malcolm Gordon armbar, the Hafel Filho submission, he didn't, even Tim Elliott fight, I think even Tim Elliott had some decent moments in that fight. He just doesn't look too great in there. But I do think Alex Perez getting submitted by Alejandro Pantoja, who has great submission skills. Muhammad Mokaev just finds ways to win fights. I think that's definitely going to benefit him. I'm going to start implementing that a little bit more into my predictions, because I think a lot of these guys with finishing abilities do pretty well in some of these fights, and you kind of realized that a little bit last week. I know altitude definitely played a factor a little bit, but I used it precisely for the what was it, Rodriguez Bondar fight, where I said, like, I think he had, is that even his last name? I don't even know. I used the idea that Rodriguez had a little bit more finishing ability, so I'm going to stick with that with Mokaev. And honestly, Alex Perez hasn't fought in forever. It's been, 2 years. So I think Mokaev can finish him by submission, I will say, in the second round. I don't think Alex Perez has too much for Muhammad Mokaev. And honestly, we haven't seen him in a while to actually know for sure. So he's only 31, 32. The fact that he hasn't been able to fight is actually kind of unfortunate, but is what it is. 23 years of age for Mokaev. Hopefully, you can get some decent work in there, and we'll have a 4.5-inch reach advantage in this fight. We'll see what he looks like. Hopefully, Mokaev just continues to evolve. He's number 8. Hopefully, he doesn't get shot up in the top 5 super quickly. Hopefully, he works his way a little bit more, because I don't know if he's ready for the Kai Car France or Manel Kopp in that division yet. So I think you should take his time a little bit more. But I'm going to go Mokaev by submission in probably the second round. Up the card to our co-main event, we have Vitor Petrino versus Tyson Pedro. I'm going to go with Vitor Petrino. I actually find his fights pretty entertaining. If you saw him on the Contender Series to where he's at now, it's actually pretty relatively vastly different, because Rodolfo Bellato is a good fighter on the ground, and I'll probably mention this for the entire time I predict this fight. Same thing with Bellato now that he's in the UFC, but he's beaten Bellato twice, and I think that's the only 2 losses on Bellato's record. But Vitor Petrino has the build for everything that he probably needs at light heavyweight. It's just more of him developing, and you're seeing him develop in front of your own eyes over his last couple fights. Like, he beat Modestas Bukauskas by KO with a check hook, a brutal KO. Bukauskas got up, but honestly, Bukauskas has actually looked pretty good since returning into the UFC, and he actually beat Tyson Pedro by decision. So pretty good win there for Petrino. Beat Marcin Prachnio by arm triangle. He also hurt him a lot in that fight. Same thing with Anton Turkalj. Really weirdly reffed fight as well. I think there's probably a couple moments that you probably could have finished Anton Turkalj, and the ref, I think it was like Mark Smith, who just allows unlimited fence grabs. So if you're, again, I'll say it a lot, but with Mark Smith, just literally just pull yourself from the fence and he won't even take a point from you. So, but Vitor Petrino has the build to be a top guy at light heavyweight. He has the power in his hands. He's developing his grappling a lot, and you're starting to see that quite a bit now. His offensive, I'll say grappling. I don't know if he has too much of a great wrestling skill, but grappling in general, he's developing a lot, and I do think he's going to be able to beat Tyson Pedro in this fight. You saw Modestas Bukauskas kind of land some of the shots that Petrino was landing on Bukauskas in their fight, and I do think he can catch Pedro with the hook. If not, Pedro's kind of tough. Maybe he can take some of the shots from Petrino, but Petrino just has a lot of power, and I can see him mixing in some of the takedowns as well, making it very tough for Pedro in this fight. I don't mind Petrino by KO here in the second round. I can see him catching him with like a left hook in this fight and hurting Pedro pretty badly, kind of just landing some extra shots and Pedro just going down a little bit more, winning by TKO. I'm actually going to go Petrino by TKO in this fight in the second round. I say all these TKOs, but then we get a card like last week where it's mostly submissions and some of the fights are a little bit rougher to watch. But I'm going Vitor Petrino by TKO. He has the power in his hands. I think he wanted to test out his grappling against Marcin Prachnio, like he would hurt him and then you take him down. And then he showed the ability to KO a guy like Bukauskas, who's actually really talented on the feet. I think he can get it done against Tyson Pedro, who's also really talented on the feet as well. So I think a left hook TKO win for Vitor Petrino in this fight. He's going to be at a 1.5 inch reach disadvantage here, but I still think he's going to be able to touch up Tyson Pedro in this fight. Up the card, we have Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Shamil Gaziev. I'm going with Shamil Gaziev. Oh my God. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, the way he fights, he's just very tentative. He doesn't commit to anything. I don't even know what it is. I'm just going to be honest. Like, I'll mention this every time he fights. He's very hesitant, doesn't want to throw. He has a lot of power in his hands, but he doesn't want to use it unless it's a guy like Chris Daukaus, where it's just a free win. You know you're not going to be in any difficult situations against a guy like Chris Daukaus. So he was able to KO him. But other than that, it's very like, I'm going to jitter around, I'm going to move around, like I'm going to try. Like he's kind of doing this thing and doesn't really land that KO blow. Shamil Gaziev is good on the ground. I think he can just take down Rozenstruik. You saw what Jilton Almeida was able to do to him, and he was able to submit Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I think Shamil Gaziev can take him down, beat him up on the ground as well if he wanted to. I don't recommend staying on the feet with Jairzinho Rozenstruik because he does have that KO power, but I'm going to go with Gaziev in this fight. Just mauling him on the ground. Probably winning by TKO. I don't mind that. I don't think he flatlines Rozenstruik because I think Rozenstruik is pretty dangerous again. Even though he doesn't really throw too much on the feet, he's very inactive on the feet. I think it is a little bit more of a dangerous game to play with him. Maybe when you mix in the takedowns, it's gonna freeze him, and you're just able to land whatever you want on him. But I think if he takes this one to the ground, I think he can win this one by TKO. Just some ground and pound strikes. Maybe in the first or second round here, it is a 5-round fight. So I'm gonna say first or second round TKO with like ground and pound strikes. I think he takes him down, kind of just mauls him a little bit, and wins by TKO there. So that's what I have for this card. Honestly, this card isn't crazy fun to look at, but I like some of the prospects. I'm really kind of looking forward to it because of that. Like Christian Leroy Duncan, Selwady, who beat George Hardwick, Javid Basharat. Who else? I guess Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios might be a pretty fun fight. I am kind of interested to see what Umar kind of looks like after a year off. Bekzat Almakhan. I'm kind of interested to see what he looks like. Steve Erceg, of course, another prospect coming up. Mokaev, another prospect. Petrino, another prospect. Same thing with Gaziev. So this is a really big prospect card. I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions. Let me know who you guys think wins in the main event down below, and I'll see you guys